First of all, I'm so grateful to have Thomas here on this call. And I know you have some super fans in this audience, and hopefully we'll get to hear from people a little bit as the conversation goes on. People can put comments in the chat. Christy will be curating those, whatever. She'll be speaking up. So if you really want her to take your question, just, promise her something. Okay. So but Thomas, I'm so glad to have you on. Let me just say a bit about Thomas. So Thomas is an author, developmental researcher, and meditation teacher, and he's the founder of Lower Light School of Wisdom. He's been practicing for over 25 years in the tradition of Sufism, Buddhism, and Christian contemplation, among others. So thank you for being here. And I do want to just say, so I have your book here. It just came in the mail the other day.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have it. I actually read this before when it was just in PDF form. And I just want to say something about it first. So first of all, it's just beautifully written. Like, I know how difficult it is to write about complex ideas, which I think is very much at the core of this book. It's not, straightforward. And to not only write coherently, but to do it beautifully. And you really, truly did both. Like, I'm like, I suck as a writer.
I'm right there
My
with you,
comparison.
Jennifer.
So it's almost poetic. But the other thing I want to say about this book is that, so, I appreciated some of your own stories from your life, some of your own faith crises and so on at an early age. And I also, in my adolescence and early 20s, went through a kind of faith crisis. Nobody had that language for it then, but a real kind of terrifying loss of belief in the way that the people around me believed or seemed to believe. And I wanted very much to believe, and I wanted very much to belong. But I felt like there were just elements that didn't fit for me. And, with time, I found a way to kind of reconcile and find a way to be honest and belong in my faith tradition and
Yeah.
in so there was something about this. So as I've done the work that I do with people, um it's like my belief in God has increased. My belief in goodness has increased. My
Yeah.
sense of this deep order that exists within humanity, within all the suffering and the chaos and the uh, inequality in people's lived experiences, that I could still feel. I have felt progressively this sense of order and divinity that's
Yeah.
in all of us. So when I
Yeah.
was reading your book, somewhere in the middle, I wasn't able to make notes and everything because I didn't have a hard copy then. I just felt it. I don't even know if I can put into words. Like, I could feel so much the truth of what you were saying. And
Mhm.
also, like, it was really giving language to the richness of the gospel, the good news of the gospel. And
Uh,
it was just so lovely for me, just so anchoring for me, just to have your language and your experience to kind of um, articulate some of what we experience through our suffering, through the vulnerability of being human, um, that is sometimes hard to really make sense of because it can feel so
yeah.
much like just like suffering, and that's it. And so,
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, I appreciate it, and I I obviously recommend the book to everyone here. But maybe Thomas, where we could
Could
start.
I respond to that,
Oh, please,
Jennifer?
please.
Um, I just want to say thank you, like really from my heart. I feel so gratified to hear you say what you just did. Words are inadequate, right? And I put as much heart as I could into the book, hoping that
Yeah.
something would come through the words that the words can't actually carry, and to feel divinity reflected through you right now, and to feel
Yeah.
like that sense of joy and connection and celebration and what we are, the reality of what we are
Yes.
that is beyond words. I just feel so gratified and joyful to just feel that reflected from you right now. So
Right.
thank you for being open to it and
Uh,
for connecting with me through it. It
Yeah.
means so much.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I would say that too. I loved just I could there was a warmth. There's a warmth in the book. There's a heart. There is. There really is.
uh,
And I even think just even your own stories are so, um, they're compelling. They pull you in. So
Thanks, Jennifer.
yeah,
Yeah, means so much.
yeah. So, so just for the audience, I sent Thomas one of the most recent episodes of Clive and Juliana, and we'll probably be referencing them a little bit just to kind of think through the dilemmas that they're up against, and in particular, Clive is up against, because I see Clive as really struggling with the vulnerability of being human, and what it means in a relationship. But before we go to any questions about that, Thomas, I mean, I think it would be really helpful just for you to articulate how you think about this human divinity experience, how you think about what it
Yeah,
is for us to be here on this planet. And that's a pretty broad question, but just jump in.
yeah, yeah. I'll do my best. Where to start? Well, it's such a gracious introduction into your space. Thank you so much for having me on the show and letting me be with you and your guests, your fans. You have uh, mega fans. I talk to so many people who are just like gaga over you. So
Oh,
it's a real honor to get to be in your space and
oh.
get to share the conversation. Yeah, what do I think? Just I'll just speak intuitively from no particular starting place. Religion didn't work out for me the first go around when I was young, and but I did find that I had a temperament that was really kind of uh, congenial to meditation, just sitting still and
Mm,
just being in my stillness. And in that experience, I talk about this in the book. It's one of the themes, but I learned this delicious taste of oneness, or maybe a little more familiar to us in our tradition, just an intimacy with the
mm,
divine. Like, I didn't realize, had I realized when I was younger that there was an opportunity to walk with God, of course I would have been interested in that. But it just
mm,
like for whatever reason, the messaging, the uncomfortable chairs and the 3 hour block of church, something about it didn't work. And I came to that experience through a different tradition. But as I did that, as I tasted this like intimacy with divinity, I got really curious spontaneously about, wait a minute, like this is not new. Like something in my heart was already awake to it from the very
mm,
beginning. And so I just naturally oriented towards the restored gospel,
mm,
which is the tradition of my parents and my parents' parents. And the book is really an attempt to just till the rich soil of our own
mm.
tradition there.
Yeah.
This is what I wanted to communicate to people. Like, look, I have kind of a weird, unorthodox spiritual formation in Buddhism and living in Asia and blah, blah, blah. But people don't need to go anywhere for this. Like, right here is
Mm,
where this communion and this intimacy begins. It's on offer. And
mm,
this theme comes up in your work, and I'm excited to talk about it in the
mm,
context of therapy and relationship.
mm,
But what I want to communicate in the book is like a better life than you can imagine, a divine life in the company, the mighty company of
mm,
divinity is right here.
mm.
And there are ways we can open ourselves to that. But just like human relationship, opening ourselves to divine relationship is just as vulnerable.
Yeah.
Maybe more so, I don't know, but it's so vulnerable to open ourselves to a genuine relationship
Yeah.
with God. So I look in the book at like, what are the ways we defend against it? What are the ways we manage to not just completely lay ourselves open and bare to that incredible intimacy on offer?
Mm,
That's it.
mm.
That's what it's about.
Yeah. Well, and I think, boy, do we resist the vulnerability,
I
right?
feel so much, empathy for Juliana and Clive and me and all of us. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, it's raw as we start to realize, as we start to take inventory of how we defend. I
Right.
think I talk about them as avoidant behaviors in the book, but whatever we call them, it's just so intense to be intimate.
Yes.
We want it. It's what we want most, and it's what we're best at defending against simultaneously. So,
Yeah, and say a little more about that if you would. Like, why why is it so terrifying for us? Why are we so resistant to it? When we all, in a
Yeah,
sense, claim that we want intimacy. I mean, if people come
right,
to me because they are certain that's what they desire.
right,
Hmm.
right. I mean, what I've found to be helpful, I think I and we are genuine when we say we want intimacy, but in my life experience, I would say that it's probably more honest for most of us all the time to admit that we're profoundly ambivalent about wanting intimacy. We don't consciously think that,
Yeah,
but if we investigate the matter, we have to admit to ourselves, actually, I I want intimacy and it's the last thing I want. I'm
right.
very ambivalent about it. And you do this in your work so beautifully. I think you help people realize their ambivalence and that they've got a foot on the gas pedal and the brake at the same time.
Yes.
It's like you want to go faster? Well, let up on that brake pedal just a little bit
Yeah.
and it's going to freak you out.
Yes, exactly. Well, and I think it's the I don't want to I think you have such great language for it, but this is how I would talk. It's the loss of control of
Yeah,
validation of the ego. It's the loss
yeah,
of, I am a vulnerable human being on this planet and
totally.
I want to be loved, but I want to have control over being loved.
Yeah, no, for sure. I agree. My language is inadequate. It falls short, but language I use in the book that I found to be kind of a helpful orienting map. We have core vulnerabilities. Our need to be in control is one of those things. When we're out of control,
Mhm.
we freak out.
Mhm.
We just do. When we don't feel safe, when we don't feel respected and regarded by other people, there are core vulnerabilities that are
Mhm.
related to our human biology, our development. And when those nerves get zinged, we freak out.
Yeah.
So I think having an awareness of what those core vulnerabilities are, how we defend against feeling our vulnerability, and skillful means to relax into a deeper intensity and therefore communion. I think that's what we're all up to in this divine adventure.
Yeah, and one of the ideas I love that you talk about in the book and is very much in sort of the courses I teach and so on is that when you feel you're not getting what you want, your spouse is
Yeah,
doing it wrong.
right.
And if they would just listen to you, you could tell them how this could all go so much better and so on.
Yeah,
And when you're disappointed, when you're when I was most recently teaching my strengthening your relationship course, I was saying, the thing that defines a marriage, really, the thesis of this whole course is how you handle yourself when you're not getting what you want
yeah,
determines the marriage.
yeah, yeah.
That's
I
it.
mean, beautifully said from an expert.
Yeah. And yet, even I today was upset because I wasn't getting what I wanted and I was
Totally.
going into my, defensive ego
Yeah.
very unimpressively,
Yeah, no, totally.
but
I,
very humanly, I suppose.
yeah, and
Mhm.
some language that's helped me with this divine adventure slash misadventure is that these practices we engage in to slowly adapt to deeper intimacy, which freaks us out. They're they're often recovery practices. And what I mean by recovery
Mhm.
practices is like as long as we're embodied, vulnerable human beings, we're going to organize around our egos. We're going to defend against anything trying to get in. And
Mhm.
it's the moment of recognition, like, oh, I'm doing that thing I do
Mhm.
again. And the recovery
Mhm.
practice is saying, I have an intention to do it differently. I really do
Yeah.
have a deeper intention to come back to intimacy. So that the
The
fail
self-awareness.
is
Yeah.
the practice because
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
recovering as we
Yeah,
do it.
exactly.
And that's just realistic because if we go in thinking we're not going to fail 1,000 times a day, even when we're like, a marriage expert and a
Yeah.
mindfulness teacher, we're just
Yeah.
deluded, I
It just
think.
is absolutely. Yeah,
I'll
exactly.
speak
Because
for
the
me, I won't
body,
speak for you.
no, absolutely, no, 100%. Because who the body, as you're saying, is like they're signaling you're not
Yeah.
getting what you want. You don't have the control you have. You're not getting the esteem you want.
Danger.
Yeah,
Danger.
exactly. And we also have, I think, patterns of how we ourselves and you can be married to someone who does it differently. But what's your
Yeah.
knee jerk? Where do you go in that moment to kind of
Right.
fend off those feelings?
Right.
Which I love the way you express that idea. Like and it feels in the moment you've fended it off. Like it feels good I told my
Yeah.
spouse exactly what was the problem, and
Yeah.
and I feel smart and able. Um,
Right.
but then as you're talking about, often in that doing that, we've actually created more suffering for us ultimately.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, totally. I love riffing with you because like our worlds are actually quite joined. Like we approach this intimacy thing
Yeah.
from different walks of life, but it's I'm just feeling how similar language it is actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, keep going. I
Well,
have
I
so many
love it. And
thoughts, but
so I think, and it's interesting because, one of the, one of the ways I talk to people is if you can see it, then you're not just in reaction. You're not just doing it and feeling super justified.
right.
You introduced me to Keegan and that
Yeah.
idea of kind of moving out of that egosyntonic state into a state of being in an ego dystonic state. You're like, okay, look what I'm doing. You're able to look back and say
Right.
that's uncool, and when I do that, it gets my spouse to do this other thing that I hate, and I'm a part of the problem. So as we can start to actually
Yeah.
see our own reactivity, it expands our agency. Like you were
Totally.
saying, a corrective practice, like you can actually go and do it deliberately differently. And I think that that's still scary. It's harder.
Totally.
It feels better to get into my self-righteousness than to go and speak just more honestly or to talk
Yeah.
more collaboratively,
Yeah.
because I don't know why
The,
it's more productive, but it feels
yeah.
scarier.
Y-
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
love this. It reminds me. So I was listening the episode you shared with me to kind of bring me up to
Mm.
speed on the conversation. I love what you said about exercise, that you hate the feeling, but wisdom is to do it until you actually learn to, in my language,
Yes.
you learn to detect the reward flavor of something that was initially aversive. Like
Yes.
you have to really get through the aversive stage to realize there's
Yes.
something that wasn't obvious before, but it's so good if I'm
Yes.
willing to stay
Yes.
with it, that it develops like kind of an intrinsic like reward flavor and
Y-
momentum to it.
Yeah.
And intimacy is this way. If I can I say a word about
Please.
this? Because
Yes.
what you're saying just like really brought this up for me strongly. If every time we're faced with we're offered intimacy, but that intimacy is very intense and it scares us and we say no to it, we manage to manipulate conditions just enough to create an artificial temporary sense of safety.
Yes.
That's a temporary reward flavor. We feel relief in the moment, but
Yes.
there's a deeper feeling of, in my own words, it's something like, but I know I'm not in control. And
Yes.
actually, after exerting this very superficial control, I feel that life
Totally.
is even less trustworthy because
Yes.
I've created the sense that I always have to be in struggle against the way
Yes.
things are.
Yeah, I love
Whereas if
that.
we stick with this invitation to intimacy, in my experience over
Yes.
time, we start to detect the subtle reward flavor of, wow, I just felt like such intense loss of control and like the sense of being humiliated, and I can't
Yes.
control what other people are saying and thinking. And yet, the subtle flavor is, and I'm still like, I'm not only alive, I'm like more than alive on the other side
Yeah.
of it. And I'm
Exactly.
realizing I can show up for life. I can be fully embodied and open-hearted and trust how things are unfolding. So life becomes
Yes.
more trustworthy as we
Yes.
start to like really let go
A
of that
hundred
vice
percent.
grip on, right.
100%.
But that process is difficult
Oh
to
yeah.
ease into,
It's like
you know.
that feeling, that deep order. It's like you can feel it the more you're
Yeah,
living in it, and you
yeah,
trust it more. I'll sometimes be saying to
totally.
myself, like, I hate this, but like, I
Yeah.
know it's what I have to do.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
Yeah.
You're,
Yeah.
I was teaching Sunday school not that long ago, and someone, as people do, just said something spontaneous and beautiful.
Mm,
We were talking about, I don't remember what, and he just said, like, with the spirit in him,
mm,
something is already working out among us.
yeah.
And like, in our faith tradition, it would be something like the Spirit is working through us, the power and the light of Christ is working through us. It's already working.
Yeah.
And if we can surrender that superficial sense of control at a personality level, what you're
Yes.
calling the deep order, we feel that catching us again and again. And we realize how trustworthy life is and how
Yes.
trustworthy relationship is,
Yes.
actually.
Exactly. Yeah. And you know, a similar idea that I saw you write about, which is just so something I say is, sexuality is not Satan's playground. Self-deception is, right? And I think you
Yeah.
said something similar to that, that the
Uh,
devil is at least cunning, right? So there is this
I
kind
think
of
you
this
said that one better. I'll give that to you. Yeah.
yeah, but we can trick ourselves into this idea that I'm getting what I want. I can be really mean. I can be really,
Right.
just today my sister was working with this very difficult person who's just very hostile and difficult. And you have this initial sense of like you shouldn't let him get away with that. But I was thinking about it more, and I was thinking that person must suffer so much in life because they live in this deeply entrapped, deceived world. Right.
Right.
And there's no freedom for that person at all. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
And
anyway, but
to the extent that we are compassionate towards our own suffering, we can see others, the reactivity that
yeah,
comes from other people's suffering, and we
yeah,
don't have to participate in their reactivity. We
yes,
can see that reactivity and say, like, I know that suffering, and I do not have to multiply that with my own suffering.
exactly. Rather than,
And
oh, we shouldn't let him get away with that. That was sort of my
right.
initial
Yeah.
response. And then I
Yeah.
was thinking, he isn't getting away with it. That is to
Yeah.
say, he's
Yeah.
living it. And I don't want to join him in that world,
Totally.
even though it satisfies that sort of ego,
Right.
defensiveness.
Yeah, totally.
But,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Amen.
yeah.
Yeah. We don't
So,
get away with anything. You know,
no.
when we defend against our own vulnerability, we're actually, if I can speak in Buddhist terms just a little bit, we're
Mm,
actually acting aggressively towards reality. We're saying that
yes.
reality is not okay as it is, so I have to do something aggressive to change it.
Yes.
And we're already caught in our own suffering at that point. We'll never get away with that. We'll always be corrected by the goodness of divine reality when we do
Yes.
that. God loves us too much to let us rebel against the goodness that's already here for us.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's like it's a it's a similar idea. I brought this up in the Faith Matters talk, but I think it was I can't remember the name of the um I can't say his name, but he says sin is the refusal to keep growing.
Mm,
Nisa,
yeah.
N-Y-S-S-A. I can't remember the it's
Oh,
like a
Gregory of Nyssa. Is that who
yes,
it is?
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
exactly
totally.
who it is.
Yeah,
So that refusal to keep growing, and what I think of that is like the reality is pressing itself on me, and
right,
I resist it. I don't want what is real. I don't want what is true. It scares me. I feel inadequate for it, and so I'm going to take everyone down instead. I'm going to take myself down
right,
and fight it. And so we end up suffering, but not because God's punishing us,
right.
but because in our resistance we will suffer rather than opening our heart up to what is and
Yeah,
tolerating the vulnerability of it, tolerating the
yeah,
discomfort of it. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that what you're describing is the world and the reality I live in. Um, I don't know, from a Latter-day Saint perspective, and I'm not sure how many non-Latter-day Saints are in the conversation, so I want to be inclusive.
Yeah, probably very few, but it's okay. This will eventually go, meaning this is mostly Latter-day Saints, I think, but be inclusive because we'll eventually put it on the larger feed and that has more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll say from my own faith perspective, God can't punish us so much as be in alignment with universal law.
Mm,
God is God from a Latter-day Saint perspective because, you know, our heavenly parents have learned to work with the flow of sacred reality. So
mm,
it's not as though they stand outside of the
mm-hmm.
law of reality to even
Yeah.
punish us,
Right.
right? They're examples to us in as we grow up in our own divinity. So I think it's
Yes.
just so
Yes.
human to suppose that we're being punished. But I
Yes.
think what you're saying about suffering and our own struggle is maybe closer to what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows?
Yeah. 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 So, um, Christy, are there any people that have questions that
Someone asked, what were Thomas's most successful practices for relenting the illusion of control?
Oh, geez. Most successful practices. Well, we all have our biases. I don't think my ideas, I write about this, I teach this stuff. It's one way to approach it. And I always recommend to people that they like sample far and wide among different teachers, different schools. But I'll say I have a bias, and this comes from my training in mindfulness, really, that just staying embodied in the immediacy of our sensations is a really
Mm,
powerful practice. It's very
mm,
difficult. Like many times a day, I will catch myself having an experience it's something less than heavenly. Let's say like
yeah.
that's an understatement, but I'll catch myself like there's just kind of a "Ugh." And if I'm honest, if I check in with my body in those moments, like I actually don't want to be in my body in those moments. It doesn't feel
Mm,
good to be an embodied being. And
mm,
of course, I have my own go-tos. Like I'll get really busy. I'll start to compulsively think. I
mhm.
love to like, check my emails and my news feeds. I have so many ways of not being in my body.
Yeah.
And just a deliberate practice where I expect to fail at it many dozens, if not hundreds of times a day of catching myself avoiding, coming back
Mhm.
into the immediacy of sensation in the body,
Mm,
realizing like, yeah, that's right. It doesn't feel good to have a body right now. But then that
mm,
reward flavor that's deeper than good or bad.
mm,
I Every time I redirect into like a fuller embodiment, I taste that flavor of there's something in me that's so deep and so vast and so divine that I can hold it all. I can
mm,
absolutely hold it all. And the to me the just the image par excellence in our tradition is Christ in Gethsemane. He's
mm,
showing us that we all have that capacity to be so big that
mm,
we can hold it all, especially when we don't want to hold it. And
mm,
our body is the alembic, it's the alchemical vessel where we prove our faith again and again by
mm,
just saying, I'm going to stay in my body, even though I really don't want to right now.
mm.
It's such a simple practice and so difficult and a
Yeah.
lifelong one that I work at and I fail at every day.
Yeah, it's so, it's just our theology of embodiment is so remarkable, right?
Yeah.
Because many Christian traditions tend to reject the body or to say the body is the threat to goodness. And of course, we have our own cultural traditions around this as well. We often talk as if the body is the threat to our goodness,
Yeah.
sexuality and so on. So, but I'm just sort of thinking out loud here. I
Yeah.
think I love what you're talking about because, first of all, it's like learning to be embodied, how to say it, to be in our bodies, to basically tolerate embodiment in a way. It's really what you're
Yes.
saying.
Yeah.
uh, and it's a process, a developmental process to kind of really be more integrated in our embodiment.
Yeah.
Um, and it is to become better friends with fear and vulnerability, I think on some level
Yeah.
is what it requires.
It
um
totally.
yeah.
I think theologically, when I is just some individual, some guy, when I redirect attention and intention into the body in my own small but significant way, I'm descending below all things, at
Mm-hmm.
least
Yeah.
to the extent that I'm able in this particular moment in my own progression.
Mm.
Um, I feel God's joy in that. I
Mm.
don't think qualitatively, I don't think, Christ descending below all things and the courage each of us have to descend into like the depths of what we're holding in a given moment is any less significant to God.
Mm. Yeah.
And that's actually quite stunning to feel
Yeah.
included cosmically on that level.
Yeah, I love that. Right, rather than this is something Christ did for me and I'm disconnected from it
Yeah.
and can't comprehend it, that
Yeah, I'm
idea.
downstream from it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes,
we're
exactly.
generating the waves moment. I mean, that's a big theme in the
Yeah.
book, atonement, at-one-ment. Every moment we can be at one with our own embodied experience, and that, from my perspective, is amplifying the depth and the power of the atonement right now.
Mm.
And that's
Yeah.
profound, just
Yeah.
how integral we all are to what we call the plan of salvation, what we call atonement. Like atonement can't be atonement fully without each of us is my view.
Yeah. Wow, that's really, so often we talk about atonement as a legalistic term, that we have this debt
Right.
and I don't know, it's always rung very, I mean, it's always rung very hollow to me. Like it's
Sure.
kind of a made up problem. That's sort of how I would think
Yeah.
about it. Like it's just a made up
Yeah.
problem and then you have a solution and why
Right.
would God create us as flawed beings and then say we're the problem? It
Yeah.
just never resonated with me. This was maybe
Right.
one of several of the things that would
Yeah.
just jar me as a younger person.
Yes.
But this idea of intimacy and my husband has talked to me a lot about this is always how he's thought about it is about an intimacy of really being at one.
Right.
That's really where the word came from, and we've put a legalistic framing on it.
Right.
But this act of intimacy and connection in suffering, in vulnerability, in the these are my words, and I think you've got a handle on it
I
at a
love
much
what I love
richer
what you're
level than I
saying. I
do.
love what you're saying.
But yeah, it's just this kind of like there's moments I know in my own life where you just sort of contemplate how remarkable and terrifying life is at the same time, how
Yeah.
beautiful and uncertain, and in this sort of duality of like,
Yeah.
and it feels like it's almost going to break your heart
Yeah.
when you contemplate it.
Yeah.
And I can also feel often in that a sense of connection to something, like a connection to something, even though I don't understand it. I wish I had it all hammered out in my mind and I knew
Right.
exactly how this was going to go.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
so interesting to me right now, Jennifer, as you're talking, because the theme of human relationship and intimacy is in the background of my mind and present between us for this call. It's so interesting to me. I'm seeing this parallel with the way we talk about atonement.
Mm.
It's yet another way we defend against intimacy,
Yeah.
right? If the atonement means that I'm flawed and I need to feel bad about it my whole life and I'm never quite there,
Right.
then that's actually very convenient to keep intimacy or love, we could say more directly, at a
Yes.
distance from myself. I don't have to
Yes.
open up to God's overwhelming love because I'm a problematic person. Like it's not
That's right.
time for that yet because
That's right.
I have so many problems to fix.
Yes.
So
That's brilliant. Yes.
even this conversation about atonement, it's saying like, you know what, you got to let go of that
Yep.
fantasy of controlling the terms of what atonement
Yes.
means.
Yeah. That's
And all of a
brilliant.
sudden it's like, whoa,
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm ready for that.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I love it. I talk sometimes about in our ego defensiveness, we can go one up or we can go one down.
Yeah.
And that both are living in a distorted view of self or other.
Right.
And both are intimacy avoidant positions.
Yeah.
They're both ways to get out of the vulnerability of who we actually are and are not.
Right.
And yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Amen. And Jesus did not look too kindly on the one up, one down model. When he
Yeah.
talks about the laborers in the vineyard, he's like, doesn't matter when you came, doesn't matter
Yeah.
when you leave. I love you all so
Yes.
radically. There's nothing you can do about it. And it destroys that
Yeah.
illusion of
Right.
one up, one down.
Exactly. Yeah. It's so good. Well, it's also related to Clive's dilemma, I think. And I know you're kind of coming to this story a little, late.
Yeah, it's not fair for me to psychoanalyze anybody. I know nothing.
Well,
I know
no, it's okay.
nothing.
It's
Let
okay.
me.
Clive's dilemma is a very human dilemma. I know this dilemma in my own life. I was terrified to kind of step into my own marriage and to really be there. I wanted to be loved, but I wanted to kind of hedge about really stepping in and choosing, because I felt like I'm going to lose control of something. He's going to really know me and see me if I do that. And also I can't, sort of hold open the idea of multiple other possibilities for my life. So,
Yeah.
and yet I was suffering. The more I did it, the more he was suffering, but I was also suffering.
Right.
And
Right.
when I finally let go of it, like everything got better. My whole life got better.
Yeah.
I felt better about
Yeah.
me. I felt better about us, But I see Clive in this story as doing what you were just talking about in this kind of going one down. Like I'm the loser with the porn addiction, who has never been enough. And I've got to earn this through my overfunctioning, earn my worthiness,
Yeah.
prove to the world I'm a good guy.
Yeah.
But it's also, in my view, a way of keeping a conditionality alive
Yeah.
that justifies him and also keeps giving the illusion of control.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's beautifully said. I don't know that I could add anything to that. I guess like language that has worked for me in this area, it's easy to allow ourselves to get absorbed in a self-improvement project.
Yes.
Because it's intoxicating because if I tell myself I'm a good person who's trying to be even better, well then like I should be able to have all the time in the world. What more noble thing could I do to try to improve myself for my wife, for my community, for God? And the subtlety of that is the actual effect of that self-improvement project is that I never actually have to be present and
Yeah.
intimate and naked right now.
Yeah.
So that's hard. And I can speak to that because I am that.
Yes. Same. Right.
Yeah.
We're always running, and then you don't have to actually just show up and be, right? And be
Yeah.
with. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's tender. I feel, I mean, Clive's a pseudonym, but I'm Clive, and I just feel so tender for that,
Yeah.
that
Absolutely.
that need to be busy. Yeah.
Yes. And Thomas, can you make a little bit of a distinction? Because some might say, well, okay, well, should we not achieve things, right? I
Yeah,
mean, okay, I'm
totally.
sure you could anticipate this. Should we just suffer? Like, is it wrong to want
Yeah.
to avoid suffering? So, how would you think about that?
Thanks for the question. The first thing I would say is that something is already working. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, even before you formulate that question, even before I pretend like I know something about the answer, something's already working.
Mm-hmm.
So, at the level of just awesome grace and divine life, we're so held already from
Mm-hmm.
what I can feel in my heart that we go left, we go right, we we get all busy and pretend like we're not worthy, we avoid intimacy. Somehow God redeems that and sanctifies it.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel that in my heart. That's my
Mm-hmm.
witness that divine reality is that awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But then if I were to and proceeding from this place is well, something's already working, so it's not like we can screw it up and like disqualify ourselves from God's love ever. And that I think leads to my second intuition about this. And my thinking has changed. Maybe I'm growing up a little bit and learning more about how God loves us as I get a little bit older. But when I'm trying to improve myself, I talk about this phenomenon of hating myself forward in the book. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm moving forward, I'm improving, I'm doing
Yeah,
things that
right.
are societally, sanctioned for self-improvement.
Right.
But the quality moment to moment in my heart is that I don't feel good enough. I just feel guilty. And actually,
Right.
the
Right.
more I do, the harder I feel like I have to try. If I can start from a place of God's awesomeness,
Yeah.
I wonder as I say that how relatable that is to everyone listening. Maybe I can slow down and say something maybe truer. Um, However, I do it, if I'm able to just touch into my intrinsic wholeness,
Yeah.
then the quality I bring to moment action is one of wholeness. And
Yes.
I'm still doing things in the world. And in fact, I'm still improving,
Right.
but it's a completely different quality. I'm improving in a kind of overflowing motion. Like I'm already whole, I'm already full. So why not play a little bit? Why not try some things?
Yes.
It's like if we have $0 in the bank account, we can't start like do that startup concept we've been thinking about for 10 years. We got to just put bread on the table. But
Right.
if we have all these savings, like I'm going to take some risks.
Right.
If I'm already whole, if I'm already full, Like, why not take some risks and try something with my wife, with my partner that I would have never tried because it was too scary before?
Yeah.
So it's something about
It's
we
creating and
learn, and this is,
creative.
yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And it's so personal. I'm hesitant to call it even anything because I know how personal this is, our
Mm-hmm.
relationship to whatever this is. But for me, I'll call it wholeness. And I know when I really, really relax in the
Mm-hmm.
wholeness and I am wholeness, then
Mm-hmm.
everything I do is a manifestation of that wholeness. And
Yeah.
I end up like being like more playful and taking risks and actually welcoming more intimacy into my
Yes.
life. So it has something to do with shifting the seat of our identity and who we take ourselves to be.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's
And
delicate.
yeah, and I'm certain that for people who were loved well, we're all loved imperfectly, but loved well, that
Yeah.
as Richard Rohr talks about, that a parent that could reflect that divine mirror could say, you are
Yeah.
precious and worthy just because you are.
Yeah.
It's much, I would imagine, I don't know if you have thoughts about this, that it's much easier to kind of feel that sense of abundance, to feel, yes, I believe in a God that loves me because I have been loved. And so, yes, I can feel that. I feel open to that uh,
Yeah.
because I've learned to trust it already.
Yeah.
But for someone who's learned it's dangerous to trust that, it's been met with disappointment.
Yeah.
Better to find the ways to control and either try to earn your love or not open up to love at all. Uh, that it's a much bigger act of faith
Yeah.
to lean into that possibility of your
Yeah.
intrinsic value. Hmm.
Yes. Yeah. I don't disagree. I think that's very much true in a relative way. It's a total privilege to have like the attention, the loving attention of caregivers when we were young to like champion us and hold us as we're learning to take risks. No question, that's a developmental privilege that not everybody has. And for those who don't have it, I also like want to come back to what you said, like so beautifully about the deeper order. I
Hmm.
have met wounded healers in this world. They are powerful because
Yes,
of the
that's so true.
privations in their lives, and like it's back to this like incredible grace. My granddad taught me this. He called it, I don't know if this is a broader teaching in the church, but he talked about the law of compensation. Like
Mm,
somehow heaven compensates us if we
yeah.
have those privileges
Mm,
that you named, then so much the better. Then we trust divine life in a certain way. And if we were deprived of all of that, then somehow in
yeah.
that brokenness, God finds a way to flow more grace through us. Like
Yeah.
somehow it's all redeemed and we're compensated in the end. It
Yeah.
is what I see.
Yeah. Yeah. And that it really is there for us. I mean,
Yeah.
it really is there for us.
Yeah.
And, I know at times, especially when I was younger, I would feel like I really believe in a God who loves me
Yeah.
and that I really matter, but I cannot feel it right now. And that
Yeah.
would still help me. Like my ego
Yeah.
defensive, I didn't have that language then, but like my brain is not able to actually open into that,
Yeah.
but I feel it. I believe it's true. And that was very
Yeah.
helpful for me to just kind of keep. I was doing a kind of meditation in my late
Yeah.
adolescence. I didn't
Yeah.
have, no one had taught it to me. It was a kind of prayer, but it was not filled with requests. It was more
Right.
about seeking
Right.
divinity
Right.
and a sense of who I actually was.
Right.
And it was a very important time for me to really feel the reality of a divinity that
Right.
was there for me. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's so beautifully said. It's stunning what God does with our broken lives, so-called. Our broken lives are our divine wholeness itself.
Hmm. Yeah. Christy, what other questions are people asking?
Did
Okay.
we answer a question through that? I
Exactly.
know
I don't even know if we
something
answered.
just happened.
Yeah.
Words were spoken.
Someone asked, they said they really enjoyed reading Jennifer's entry in Why I Stay Too. And they wondered if Thomas had to write an entry for Why I Stay 3, what he might say. So I don't know if Thomas.
Do you know what that is, Thomas? Do you know what that Why I Stay is?
I mean, contextually, I
Yes.
have a sense. Yeah.
Yes.
What was the word count on your essay to give me a sense of?
Yeah.
Is this like, are these long form essays? Are these
Yeah.
book chapters?
Yeah. I don't know if it was long enough, but it was long.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows?
Yeah, what would I write for Why I Stay? I mean, if I could just shift the parameters of like when we say why I stay, we generally are talking about why I stay in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And that's an important framing. For me, I would just shift the boundaries of the question a little bit, like why I stay in the gospel, why I stay in relationship to God is because the more I open to intimacy with God, the more I realize how God cannot let me fail and will not let me fall.
Mm,
I stay because I don't even think it's cosmically possible to not stay. If staying means staying in relationship with the divine and being made more holy through that communion.
mm-hmm,
And I stay in church because I just like going to church. I love,
mm-hmm,
make friends there and sing about Jesus and,
mm-hmm.
you know, it's
Yeah.
renewing.
Yeah. I think why it's often hard for people to stay is if they feel like I can't get the validation of what I feel or who I am. And I mean, I think why church was painful for me as a younger person at times was because
Yeah.
I felt like I had to contort myself into something to get the group's validation and to be
Yeah.
what the group wanted from me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think what often happens for people who stay is perhaps a deeper internal sense. I mean, that's really how you're answering this question, is because I understand something that I need and that I can't depart from because
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
resonates with me and I feel it. And I love the people at church, like, and I like them, but you're not sort of looking to that to tell you who to be.
Yeah, yeah, no,
Mhm,
thank you for that
mhm.
reflection. I feel very seen when you say that. And I don't know if this is allowed, but I want to like have a mulligan and answer that question again because it like
Yeah,
the deeper layers
sure.
of it are setting in. These are my own views.
Mhm.
But I think one reason I quote stay is I think people who know my background, I wasn't church going for 20 years, most of my adult life. And I felt, for whatever reason, I felt very empowered to take really good care of myself and ask, like, what do I need to grow in
Mhm,
God?
mhm.
And I'm not saying I got it all right, but I at least felt confident enough to take some risks and try some things. So I didn't feel like I needed to stay, and I didn't feel like I needed to return. There was no compulsion. There was no
Yeah,
coercion. I freely move about because I believe in the goodness of God. And if people need to take care of themselves by leaving, they're still my brothers and sisters. And if they take
exactly.
care of themselves by staying,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. So
Exactly.
lots of ways to come at that question.
That's right. Exactly. I feel that so much. It's like really the goal is how do we move into this sort of deeper communion, and that's the goal. In my
Yeah,
view, with I'm not, telling you should stay, you should go. That's never.
right.
I want people to kind of really attend to what they need and who they are and what's going to allow this sort of divine light to resonate in their lives more.
Yeah.
And that may be different answers for different people, but that's the goal. Yeah.
Amen.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sing it.
Yeah. Christy, I don't even know what time it is. Okay, we've got a little time. Give us some more questions, Christy.
Sure, sure. Someone said, what similarities do you observe between recognizing, accepting, digesting, and then releasing physical and psycho-emotional pain?
Mm.
Read me the verbs again. Will you give it from the top? What were
Sure.
my Yeah, thank you.
What similarities do you observe between recognizing, accepting, digesting, and then releasing physical and psycho-emotional pain?
What similarities? Is that
Yeah,
what it
that's a
was?
tough
That's the
question.
question. I know.
Yeah.
That's
Is
why
it
I'm
what
here.
similarities we see in that process? It's such a beautiful sequence they describe that. I mean,
Yeah,
it's,
that's what he was asking. What similarities do you see between those?
I mean, honestly, this is one of those moments where, the answer is in the question. I just feel like somebody who's experienced this process of psycho-spiritual healing and purification so many times to articulate that question says a lot about the one asking the question. I don't know if uh, who was it? Who was the author who said uh, always a beautiful answer that leads to a more beautiful question. The question is more beautiful than the answer. I yield to Jennifer on that one.
So, yeah, the person
Can I
asking the
do that?
question, the person asking the question is a beautiful person, is a beautiful soul. I've never met him, but I know from the questions and the responses he gives online to many other people that he's a
Yeah.
thoughtful,
Yeah,
genuine soul, really.
it's an amazing question. Maybe if I could just add my own flair to it. It's already so beautifully phrased. In a sense, there's no difference between the recognition, acceptance, digestion, excretion, however you worded it so perfectly. It's all just one. It's We use words to kind of divide up the process, but it's all just one seamless flow of grace, which clearly you're intimate with, and it's just beautiful to
Mm,
name it that way.
mm.
Do you have
Yeah.
something on that, Jennifer? I'm curious.
Do I have any thoughts? I don't know that I do. I'm just thinking about it. I mean, something I've been thinking about is that, I'm not a meditator. I've done lots of yoga and things like that. And then we'd come to the Shavasana and I'd be like, I've got things to do. I got to get out. I mean, I don't know. I'm such a doer. I grew up, my parents are both farmers from Idaho,
Oh,
and there's just like this
amazing.
very strong work ethic in my family of origin. And, um, so the contemplative life, I mean, it's actually not quite fair to myself because on the other hand, I'm always thinking a lot about life and the meaning of life.
Yeah.
And I do
Yeah.
spend a lot of still time, actually. I really
Yeah.
do. Um, and, and, so it's interesting, but there's something
I
about
have
the
a challenge.
practice.
I want
Okay,
to get in
please
on
give it
this.
to me.
Yeah, no, you go ahead. I mean, I just want to register my complaint with you.
Okay, well, I think I'm leading right up to it, but I think there's something about the practice of meditation.
Yeah.
For me, it's like, it feels like that's just like a
Totally.
waste of time. I mean, that's really what kind of comes to mind for me.
Totally. Yeah.
I recognize the immaturity in what I'm
It
actually
might be.
saying because
I can't prove that it's not just a tremendous waste of time. It's a sunk cost for me at this point. I'm many
now
tens of
you have to
thousands of
defend it.
hours.
Yeah, exactly.
It's I got to make this thing pay off, Jennifer. Easy.
But the thing is, I also know when I spend time in just like just with my own breath, just relaxing into, and for me, I think the kind of I didn't move so much into meditation and a young age, but I very much moved into this kind of self honesty. Like this was a thing for me that was like
Yeah.
a rigorous self honesty that I think produced a lot of kind of clarity in my life and a
Yeah.
sort of deeper tether to what's true, and that was very anchoring for me.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know that I'm as good as I could be in a way that I think would enrich my life
Yeah.
in being taking more time for just this contemplative or sort of resting into what is. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. I'm going to go a different direction than I thought I might, because I'm thinking about the question that was just asked about this
Yeah.
process of, recognizing, accepting, digesting.
Yeah.
I mean, we talk about the discipline, the spiritual practice of fasting in our tradition. And at just a bodily level, it allows our digestive system to just like
Yeah.
burn through anything undigested. It's healthy for the body to fast.
Yes.
At a more subtle level, it's very healthy to have a sensory fast, however often, like
Yeah.
to not take in new information, to not consciously try to generate new thoughts. For a long time, at the end of the day, I've had a practice of just kind of being still for a moment. It doesn't have to be long.
Mm.
And when I create a context of stillness, I feel the body mind kind of catching up with the experiences of the day and digesting
Mm.
it,
Yeah.
right? So to just, I mean, to have a sensory fast maybe is culturally feels a little more close to what we're used to doing.
Yeah.
And we can all do that. You don't have to like buy a meditation cushion and incense and a temple gong and ring it. But like to take a moment of
Yeah.
stillness and feel the way like spirit is just using experience for its good.
Yeah.
Spirit experience is consecrated for our good, and
Yeah.
meditation is just like a willingness to digest that, to like really receive the nutrients of our lives.
Yeah. Well, and to be honest, it's in those moments of stillness that the richness of life is more available to me. Like I can
Yeah.
feel it more, and I'm in it more. And it's when you're just running from one thing to the next, you never are there for it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's
yeah.
right. It's a contrast too. I mean, the way like we couldn't read poetry if the whole page were ink, there'd be no words. It's the negative space, it's the blank space that causes the letters to be
Mm.
discernible. Silence is like this palate cleanser. It causes sensory experience to pop. And it gives us, I think, for me, it gives us a better chance at realizing like this display that we call human life.
Mm.
I mean, it's unbelievable that we're having this experience we're having right now.
Yes, it is. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think we're at time. Yeah, we are. So, but it's been so fun to just have this
Totally. I love
conversation.
it, Jennifer. Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for having me here. I hope the conversation was helpful and supportive to
A
people
hundred
listening.
percent, 100%. And maybe
Yeah.
we can have you back again at some point. So
Oh, indeed. Yeah, I'd be
yeah,
honored. Yeah. And thank you
yeah,
again for spending time with the book. I just feel your heart in it. Just to be able to have this conversation with you is why I wrote it, to just connect with people about the divine life and to just live in our wholeness and our fullness together. And I've gotten to do that with you, and I couldn't ask for more.
yeah. Well, thank you, Thomas. And thank you to all the listeners here. Just, that, I mean, I'll just say the thing that like sustains me so much in the world is seeing the good in humanity. And there's a lot of dark in humanity, but I see
Yeah.
it so much in you, Thomas. I see it so much in the people in this collective group because I see their conversations online. They're grappling with some of the themes that are in the podcasts and so on. And just so much desire to seek and live in the good. And it just, it's a privilege to be brothers and sisters together. So,
Yeah, I felt that in this space with you. I feel the same. Yeah, total privilege.
yeah. Okay, thank you everyone who's here. I'm sorry for all the probably millions of questions there that we didn't ever get to, but thanks again, Thomas, and
Yeah.
and I do hope we have you again at some point. That would be wonderful. So,
Thanks,
yeah.
Jennifer. Thanks so much.
Okay, take care.